Empower Radio presents The Farkas Files, an exploration of energy, metaphysics, and the paranormal with David Franklin Farkas. The Farkas Files. The truth is in here somewhere. Here's your host, David Franklin Farkas.
Good evening. Thanks so much for being with us. And I always sit here chuckling when I say evening because it could be any time of day, any place in the world, and you could be listening to us. So that's always very exciting. And thanks for taking some time to tune in and listen to our conversations. Tonight's guest is someone I'm really looking forward to talking to. Tim Braun is a medium. He has a very interesting approach to helping the living heal their grief by using his mediumship. And we'll be talking to him in a few minutes. But first, tonight's metaphysical musing. And seems like a good night to just talk about what is this thing that we do and what are we doing? Why can we do stuff that doesn't have to do with the physical world? How does that work? And there are some really basic science bits of information that most people never hear that makes this not seem so strange. First of all, if you talk to a physicist about how much of the universe is matter, is stuff that's got mass, physical stuff, they will tell you that the latest calculation is somewhere around 3.7%. Which means that 97% or so of the universe is non-physical and is some kind of energy rather than matter. But most of it they don't really have a great explanation for yet. So when we talk about focusing on the energy and working with energy, we're talking about most of the universe. And the explanations go back 9,000 years in every indigenous culture all over the world, every mystical tradition, and all of those traditions come up with very similar ways to discuss what the energy is and how to work with it. So in some ways, science is playing catch-up. The other thing is this whole idea of consciousness existing after you don't have a physical body. Well, even in Newtonian physics, the laws of thermodynamics tell us that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change form. If that's true of everything in the universe, then we can't disappear. We can change from being physical, being in a body that has mass and matter, to some form of energy, but we can't possibly disappear. And so all of the stuff that has to do with ghosts and the paranormal and all of this investigation that people do is really about confirming in some way while you're still in a physical body that you don't disappear, that it's not even life after death. It's that life continues, that consciousness continues. And some of that time you're in a physical body, but not all of that time. And, we have a lot of fun with people coming at the issue of ghosts from all different directions, but tonight we're going to be taking a slightly different approach to it. So that's tonight's metaphysical musing, and I'm really looking forward to talking to our guest, Tim Braun. Tim, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks, David. Thank you very much for having me.
And you're actually an internationally known medium. A lot of people have read your materials and seen you on TV and whatnot. But you have a unique approach that I'm really looking forward to talking about. But what I ask each guest to do as we start out is tell your story. How did you wind up doing this? How did your life unfold that you wound up doing this?
Sure, that's a great question. Going back to when I was a young boy, going back to when I was about 6, 7 years of age, I was seeing things, I was hearing things, I was actually seeing people in spirit. Mm-hmm. But however, at that exact same time, my brother, who was and still is 18 years older than myself, was diagnosed with schizophrenia. So what he was seeing, I wasn't seeing. What I was hearing, he wasn't hearing, and I was just scared. So from 6 or 7 years of age all the way until my early 20s, every time I saw spirit, every time I saw a person walking by that was in spirit, that was in non-physical, I would actually just turn around and I would look the other way. I would consistently ignore it for all those years. And the reason why I ignored it, or at least tried to ignore it until my early 20s, is because I did research on schizophrenia and realized that if you don't really get it by 20, 21, 22 years of age, then you're not going to get it. So I really kind of held out until my early 20s. In my early 20s, I allowed myself to open up to seeing spirit again because I just knew I wasn't going to go crazy, even though that some of my family members think to this day I've gone crazy, being devout Catholics as they are. I'm clearly I'm not crazy. But in any event, in my early 20s, I started seeing things again, hearing things. And at that same time, I was in my college dorm room here in Los Angeles. And I actually had, this is 1995 actually, and I had a dream that the late Mother Teresa came into my dorm room. She had her hands spread open. She showed me the plane, me walking off the plane, and me shaking her hand and walking into her village. And it was just a very quick 10-second, 15-second dream, but I remembered it so strong. It was right before I woke up. And I followed that dream, and long story short is I found myself in Calcutta 3 months later to the day, working with Mother Teresa hands-on. And the point of that is that Spirit was coming through and saying, okay, you are connected to Spirit. You're seeing things. You're hearing things. This dream that we gave you, everything came true as far as the plane that you walked off of, shaking her hand, working with her for a week and a half in Calcutta, India. And once I received that, I'm like, okay, I'm certifiably not crazy. And once I left India, came back, I just allowed myself to open up, and that's when my mediumship started. And ever since, I've been fully booked for the last 20 years or so. Up until now, I've done over 14,000 individual sittings, and people sometimes ask, well, how do you know that you've now done over 14,000 individual sittings? And I just respond by, ever since I started doing spirit work and doing my mediumship, I've been fully booked up. And one day I just was bored, and I calculated how many weeks I was doing this, how many months I was doing this, and how many years I was doing this. And last year it was 13,000, and now it's over 14,000. But I certainly enjoy my work. Death does not discriminate. When I do work like this, it's a sitting. We sit with Spirit, and we see who comes in and who doesn't come in. But going back to your question on how this started for me, it really started when I was a kid. And if I had a mentor at that time, or if I had someone say, hey, listen, this is a gift, I would have been doing sittings in grade school.
Right. And that's the difference between this culture and indigenous cultures, where you would have been noticed immediately as being gifted and would have been apprenticed to an elder that was a master of doing mediumship.
Exactly. When you go to India or you go to other countries.
The schizophrenia issue, which I'm sure was terrifying. One of the many odd jobs I had when I was apprenticing with my teachers, I was on walkabout for about 3 years, was working in a locked psych unit at night. And so there were all these people that had voices and had ongoing conversation with their voices, and I could see that the voices were ghosts. So these were people who never had an opportunity to learn anything about mediumship. They just struggled. Well, they didn't struggle. They just had conversations that other people didn't understand. And when they got older and their life got to a stage where they couldn't do things for themselves, they wound up in a psych hospital. And I just thought, what a shame. You know what? They had this gift that was totally misunderstood and not recognized. So, between the interpretations in Catholicism and watching your brother with his struggle, I really honor that you came out the other end of that doing this amazing work.
Well, there's a fine line between genius and insanity, and I'm not in any way calling myself, a genius, but, there's that fine line between, having that genius quality and going insane. And the only reason why I'm bringing that up is that through all those years of, looking the other way, I was basically disciplining myself not to go crazy. I was disciplining myself to stay focused, stay grounded. And in my early 20s, I started meditating 20 minutes every single day, and doing that since now. And that meditation has really grounded me. And that's one of my practices, is in order to keep me grounded, to keep me sane. Because, as I mentioned, and I'll say again and again, there's a fine line between genius and insanity. And if we can just ground ourselves and, really connect with spirit, the truth is there. What you're saying about the indigenous cultures, it's actually true. What you were saying is true. You go to third world countries like India and other countries, you ask any of the children, where is spirit, or rather, where is God? And where they point to their heart. You ask all the children here in the States, where is God? And they point up. They point to the sky.
Outside.
And outside, right. And, I always try to teach my clients and say, listen, everything is within. If we can start paying attention to those hunches, if we can start paying attention to those intuitions, everything is right there within. We don't need to look outside ourselves.
Right.
If people really, did their meditation and really paid attention to their dreams, and really, there's a lot of people that would be able to do their own mediumship.
Sure.
But, a lot of people, especially in this culture, we don't meditate. We don't pay attention to our hunches or our intuition. We're too busy. Listen, most Americans don't even take a vacation. We're constantly going. So, that's just on a little bit of a side note there.
Right, but, except when they're sitting watching reality TV drinking, which is a stereotype.
Exactly.
I want to give you a different perspective on the genius versus crazy thing, though. You're familiar, I'm sure, with the bell curve, the normal distribution of anything in the world.
I am, yes.
And normal is just the middle of the curve. Most people are in the middle of the curve. So if you draw a line across it, there's this big bubble in the middle. And that's normalcy, and that's what everybody thinks is important, is being normal. But there are two kinds of deviancy. There's negative deviancy on one end, and that's all the bad stuff that people are concerned about and make rules about and have ways of dealing with. On the other end is positive deviancy. And all the good stuff in the world comes from people that are positively deviant, that are not normal, that have abilities that other people don't have, and however they manage to honor that and work with that, come up with things. So you think of Einstein and Edison and Picasso and Salvador Dali, all these extravagant, very, very different people were definitely not normal, but they were not dangerous.
Absolutely.
They were brilliant, and their struggle was to deal with that and figure out how to be that and do that while being in the world. The other end of the spectrum is, all the people that do bad stuff in the world. And I would include in that, lots of politicians and bankers who are doing things that are dangerous and bad for other people.
Right. When I do my mediumship, I always tell my clients, even though that you're the one paying, to have me, do the sitting for you, and I still do private sittings here in my office in Costa Mesa, California, whether in person or by phone. And it doesn't matter whether a person comes to me in person or by phone. I always tell them the less the medium knows, the better. When you go to a medium, you sit down, you stay open, which is basically open-minded, but you don't need to respond really to anything. I always tell my clients that when we do work like this is to sit back, relax, and pretend like this is a movie that you haven't seen before, and you don't know if it has English subtitles or not. You're coming in with an open mind. And when you come with an open mind, then spirit can work with you. If a person comes in closed-minded, Sure, I can still do my work and still get spirit through, but it's much more difficult and it's much more taxing on the medium's energy. I can tell you a story. This is just going back a few years ago, actually about 10 years ago. I had a client who lives in Virginia, but the wife came in. She had a sitting with me, and she left very happy, and then she came in about 3 weeks later and she brought her husband. Clearly the husband did not want to have a sitting. He had his arms crossed. He was very reluctant. He didn't want to be there. It felt like he was forced being there. So I went to him, and I was seeing this man in spirit directly behind him, David. And I said to him, I said, well, sir, I just want to let you know that there's one man that's coming through, and he's showing me a uniform from Vietnam, and he's telling me that he was a friend of yours. Can I bring him through? And very cockily, he said to me, he goes, I had 5 friends who died in Vietnam. What's your point? Well, what I did is I went back to the man in spirit, and I always tell my clients that, even though that, you're paying me to do the work for you, I don't work for you. I work for spirit. They are my true employers. And whatever they say, I say. So the man put his hand, the man in spirit, put his hand over his private genitals, and he says, would you let my friend know that I got my left testicle shot off? So I was reluctant to say that in front of his wife. And I said, ma'am, I'm sorry for saying this, but this is what I want to say. And once I said that, David, this man just broke down crying. He had a breakdown. He had a meltdown. And he composed himself after about a minute of crying, and he said, that's my friend Jimmy. We always teased him because he always got that left testicle shot off. And he goes, I didn't even think of him. I did not invite him in here. But that's a clear example of the work that I do and about, when that person goes to spirit, as you said before in your broadcast, that's energy. It goes back into spirit. And that energy is always contactable. Most of the time it's always contactable. And, when I do this work, we never know what's going to come through. We never know what's going to happen. I'm doing my 4th, believe it or not, casino show here at Paula Casino in January, and this is 700 people that come to the casinos. And when we do work like this, I'm sometimes a little bit nervous when I start because I have no idea who's going to come through. Right. I'm just a vessel for spirit, and any legitimate medium will tell you that we don't have any control who comes in or who doesn't come through. It's in a way free for all. However, the client, the sitter, by asking those on spirit side to come through, sometimes they actually have a better shot of guiding who needs to come through or who will come through, but that's not always the case.
Right. And I mentioned this before we went on the air. Just wanted to clarify for the listeners, a lot of the people that come on the show are talking about ghosts. And the way I understand ghosts is there are people who died, so they no longer have a physical body, but they haven't crossed over. Whatever crossing over means, they haven't gone to the other side, however we want to talk about it. But that's a specific shift in where they are and their consciousness that allows them to integrate being out of the body. So they're kind of stuck here, however that works. So my work is more about getting them to cross over. The folks that you are in contact with are the people who have already done that, who have crossed over. Yes.
I see ghosts all the time, but when I do my work with clients, 95% of the people that come through are actually people that have already transitioned. These are people that have made that transition, and they're coming through to express their love or express communication, express information, whatever it needs to be said. Whenever I do my sittings, whether it's for a large group or whether it's for individual sitting, I always do a 2-minute guided meditation with a client just to kind of protect the room with God's white light. And I always do that prior to every sitting, and then when I'm done with the sitting, I do the closing meditation. And the reason why is just to create a really safe environment, because we never know who's going to come through. So when I do that opening meditation, I always know that for the most part, a person who's going to come through is of the light, is of healing. Now, sometimes that's not always the case. I had a client going back about 12 years ago. And when I started bringing him through, it was on her father's side of the family. I just put my hand over my chest, and she says, "Are you okay, Tim?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "This man's not your father, but I clearly know that this is your dad's brother." And she says, "Well, are you okay?" And I says, "I don't like this guy. I just don't like his energy." I said, "Do you mind if I not bring him through?" And she goes, "Oh, I would please invite you not to bring him through. This man molested me when I was a child."
Wow.
So that man was coming through to apologize, but his energy was so toxic and so heavy that even me, the medium, couldn't handle it.
Right.
So, that's the work that I do. But, we just never know, who's going to come through in a sitting. It's a sitting. We sit with spirit and we see who comes in and who doesn't.
Right. And that you just talked about two things that are very important that isn't discussed a whole lot, which is a trained medium is going to create a safe space so that everybody is protected and knows how to control who comes through. So you can say no to somebody. Mm-hmm. One of the things that concerns me a lot is when kids play around with this stuff, when they, go some private place and light candles or get a Ouija board or whatever they do, and they want to talk to someone on the other side because it'll be fun. Mm-hmm. And the way I always describe that is it's like going down to the worst part of town, to the darkest alley, run down to the end of the alley and knock on the door because someone's there and they're probably doing something. Mm-hmm. Maybe it'll be fun.
That's a good point. And that is true. You always have to have that protection in doing work like this. But, I want to put this out for the listening audience here, is that when a person consistently has a drug addiction, whether mm-hmm. young or old, or an alcohol addiction, or even if a person is always venomously angry, those energies put you down on such a lower level that even that lower level will bring lower souls to you.
Right.
When we vibrate to a higher vibration, and listen, sometimes we have good days and sometimes we have bad days. Last week, for whatever reason, I don't know what it was, I must have woke up on the wrong side of the bed. I had a bad day all last Wednesday, and I don't know what got into me, but you know what? I was faking it till I made it. I kept on saying, I'm blessed that I have my home. I'm blessed that I have my house.
Right.
I'm blessed that I have my friends. And I kept on saying this, even though I didn't mean it, even though I didn't feel it. I had to lift my vibration back up to the high point again. And that's the point here, is if the listening audience can understand, is if you can keep that energy up, and keep the toxins out of the body, then you rise and you raise to a higher vibration and you connect with that energy on that level. But when you seep down to that lower level, then you're also bringing in that equal energy to you.
Right. And gratitude is the key to energy level in so many ways. Hey, Tim, I want to make sure people know how to find you. So why don't you give us your web address?
Oh, sure. It's timbraun.net, which is Tim, and the last name is Braun, as in Nancy.net. And I'm located here in Costa Mesa, California.
And you have a new book that's did it just come out?
It's coming out here in about 2.5 weeks, Life and Death. And it's an amazing book. I have 4 New York Times best-selling authors endorsing the book. It took me over 10 years to finally put this together. David, I will tell you, going back 6 years ago, I had a friend of mine who's an author. He has written 5 books, and he's been on TV, and he goes, Tim, you need to write your book. You need to write your book. And I'm like, I'm not going to write it. And he goes, you're crazy. You have so many stories. You've done all these clients. I'm like, I'm not going to write it for the intention of just going on a TV show. I have to write the book when it's right. And I waited until now. And I must say it's a very, very good book. It's really helping you deal with healing and healing grief. And it's really nice, the feedback that I've gotten from a lot of people already. We actually just launched the book 2 months ago in Switzerland, Germany, and Austria, so it's all in the bookstores there. And then it gets launched here in the States here in about 2.5 weeks. You can get it on Amazon right now. and then it gets launched in Italy come middle of next year. So I'm really excited about it, that everybody's
Fantastic.
really reading it and grabbing onto it and saying, wow, this is a great book. And I'm getting all these publishers that are saying, we want to buy it too. So, but you know what? The intention was about healing. The intention was about helping people, not about me just doing it just to write a book. And so once you put that intention out there for anything, whether it's writing a book as I have done, or whether it's being a mother, or whether it's being a faithful spouse, or whether it's being a great student or a good employee or a good employer, once you put that intention out there, that's the most important thing.
Well, the most important thing right now is we're going to a break.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
Perfect timing. My guest tonight is Tim Braun. We will be back shortly, unless, of course, we get taller, here on the Farkas Files on Empower Radio. This is David Franklin Farkas. Don't you go nowhere. Stay with us.
This week's episode, Danger at the Old Well.
Last one to the old well's a rotten egg. Ha! I win. Whoa! Ah! Sassy! Johnny fell down the well. I'm wet. What, Sassy? You know where Mr. Gunderson keeps his rope? Go get it, girl. What? You'd rather use this time to set people straight about shelter pet adoption? I'm cold. People shouldn't be afraid to adopt from a shelter? Because shelter pets are screened for sound health and temperament? I'm wet and cold! Sassy, what about Johnny? What? Let Johnny sit in the well until he learns to be more self-reliant? Sassy! What'd he say?
Sassy is brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org. Remember, adopt.
Have you ever lost a cat? And have you ever wanted to get your cat back after you lost it? Hi there, I'm Andrew Hoffman. I went on this website called InventNow.org. Then I decided to make an invention of my own. It's called the Lost Cat Magnet Invention. So you can get your cat back after you lost it. Just turn it on, and lost cats stick to it. That's a good cat. If your cat was hiding up in a tree, it won't be up a tree anymore. It will be stuck to the lost cat magnet. And sometimes they fly toward you in the air. Just listen to one satisfied cat. See, that's proof. You should go to the InventNow.org website too. But just remember one thing. Don't do a lost cat magnet.
Anything's possible. Keep thinking. Get started on your own inventions or just play some games at InventNow.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, the National Inventors Hall of Fame Foundation, and the Ad Council.
I'm home, and I love it. I'm home where I belong. I'm home, and I love it. I'm home where I belong.
It's always nice to come home. But these days, many Americans are at risk of foreclosure and losing their homes. Fortunately, help is available. Making Home Affordable is a free program from the U.S. government that has already helped over 1 million struggling homeowners, and we want to help you.
I'm home, and I love it. I'm home.
Find out now what your options are. Go to makinghomeaffordable.gov or call 1-888-995-HOPE. The sooner you act, the better chance we can help you.
I'm home where I belong.
Brought to you by the U.S. Treasury, HUD, and the Ad Council.
Now back to the Farkas Files with David Franklin Farkas on Empower Radio.
And we're back with my guest Tim Braun, who is a medium. His new book is Life and Death. And Tim, I just wanted to share with you that I worked with Mother Teresa's Missionaries of Charity in Haiti.
Wow.
And some of the things you described about your experience in Calcutta were mirrored in what they offered to the people in Haiti, the same kinds of hospice and places, a specific hospice for dying children, medical clinics. And I asked the sisters, who look just like the sisters do in Calcutta, what was different between Calcutta and Port-au-Prince, Haiti. And they said basically the color of their skin and the language. We see the only thing that they didn't see in Haiti that they saw in Calcutta was leprosy.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But all of the other
Exactly.
problems, all of the other concerns, everything that they did in Calcutta, they were doing in Haiti.
Well, including
having the monks have a program for street boys. They also had that there.
A lot of people don't know this about Mother Teresa, but back in 1982, during the Beirut War, she had to get to one of her homes there, one of the children's homes in Beirut, and so the fighting was going on, and so she says, I need to go to my home, and they says, you can't, Mother, there's a war going on, and we can't. So she proceeded to take the keys out of the missionary's hand and says, if you're not going to drive me, I'll drive myself. And she started to take the keys away, and they said, oh, no, we'll drive you. When she was driving across, the war stopped. All fighting stopped. She got to the children's home, brought them the medication, brought them food, and then she came back. I think it was about 48 hours later. It was less than 2 days. And when she got back to her original spot, the war resumed again. And I look at that as energy. I look at that as connection to God. I look at that as prayer. And yes, she was a Catholic nun, but it doesn't matter what religion you are out there, as long as you have connection to the source, as long as you have connection to God. I say spirit, some people say God, it's the same thing. And once you have that connection and you put that prayer out there, really, we can actually move mountains. We can actually make miracles happen. And that's one of the things that Master Jesus, and I say Master, being a former Catholic, and the Catholics don't like hearing Master Jesus. They like hearing, no, he's Jesus Christ. I'm like, no, he's one of the teachers. He's one of the main teachers. But the thing about Mother Teresa is she was only, 5'2" or 5'3", and the joy about it is I got to pray with her, every day for an hour and a half, just sit next to her, sit next to her energy, and it was just a blessing. But that's after I came back from India. Everything just shifted for me. Everything just shifted.
Yeah, the sisters in one of the places that I worked with them let me into their private residence to pray with them. They knew I wasn't Catholic, and they knew I was doing things very differently, but it was an extraordinary experience. They also knew that I did hands-on healing, and they had one baby that they didn't think was going to make it, and they said, you try.
Mm-hmm.
And let me work on her. And the child was too far gone, but there were those moments where we totally bridged everything, and they just said, obviously you do something that's different than what we do from the same place.
Good for you, David. Good for you.
It was an amazing opportunity. I was supposed to be there for 3 weeks, which is the standard. There are more missionary trips to Haiti than anywhere else because it's so close to the United States. And when I was getting ready to leave, everybody said, do you have anything you really have to do? Why don't you stay? And I wound up staying for 3 months, and people in the town gave me a place to stay. And when that didn't work, I stayed in one of the buildings for the Missionaries of Charity and stayed there until, all the arrangements didn't work anymore.
When I was working with Mother Teresa there in Calcutta there, she told me, and I'll pass this on to your listening audiences, she says, you don't need to come to India. You don't need to come to Calcutta to work with the poor. She goes, there are poor in your own backyard. Go home and take care of your own people in your own backyard. You don't need to come to India, take care of your own. And that's one of the things that always sat with me. And that's one thing that always sat with me is doing my work as a medium is, here she was such a powerful, powerful person, but she always remained humble. And, I've done over now, as I mentioned, 14,000 sittings. I've had heads of state I have a lot of celebrities that come to see me, and I always remain humble doing my work. And I learned that from Mother Teresa. And I feel that, God giveth, God taketh. And so if I remain humble and realize that this is a gift from Spirit, then I can still do this work for the public and help raise the vibration of the planet.
Absolutely. It's wonderful, wonderful work. One of the things you mention in the book, and I'm fascinated with the way that you approach it, is using the mediumship conversation between the living and the people who have crossed over as a way to deal with grief. Now, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, everybody on this planet, we are affected by grief, whether it's low level or if it's high level. And if we can incorporate, how do I explain this for people that will never have a sitting with the medium, but if we can incorporate and get those people that are in total grief in reality and say, listen, there is energy around you. Whether it's a grandfather of yours that you loved, whether it's a neighbor, whether it's a friend, whether it's a friend from high school, that energy is around you. And if you can connect with that energy and ask for help, ask for guidance, ask for hunches, that energy will help you heal. It's just that you have to be open to it. And I like using the approach of using both aspects in order to help that client, because not everybody's going to be healed by having a sitting with a medium. Not everybody is going to be healed by going to a counselor, going to an MFCC counselor, or to a therapist. We all need healing on this planet, but I feel that if we can connect with an energy that is unseen, which is around us, all around us, as you said, 90% of space is energy, which is true, and connect with that, healing takes place. But you have to have that faith. You have to have that belief. And sometimes when you don't feel it, you have to fake it until you make it.
Right.
I look at the seashore as one vast big seashore. But if you look at the seashore, David, every single granular of sand, I look at that as a person, just thousands and thousands, millions and millions of people on this planet. If you can be that one little morsel of sand and you can change, you can do some healing on yourself, whether connecting with a medium or doing some work spirituality, working with a counselor, whatever it may be, and you shift, you raise your vibration, all those pieces of morsel of sands that are around you have to shift too. And then, of course, all those morsels of sand have to shift around them. And that's what I'd like to get to your listening audience, that if you can be that one morsel of sand and you can shift, you can make a change, eventually you will change the whole seaboard. You'll change the whole beach. Because once you make that shift, once you make that healing and you raise that vibration up, you heal everybody around you, and everybody has to follow accordingly. Does that make sense, David?
Makes perfect sense. And the image that I'm getting is when sand gets wet. If you pour, a little kid pouring a bucket of water in the sand, it starts in one spot, but it gets absorbed and spreads out.
That's a good one too, right? But a lot of people say, "Well, gosh, I'm just an auto mechanic, or I'm just a this, or I'm just a that." And I always reflect back to my clients doing this work is, it doesn't matter what you do on this planet. The only thing that it matters is you do it 110% as you best possibly can, whether you're a medium, whether you're an auto mechanic, whether you're a school teacher, because if you can do it 110% as you best possibly can, you raise the energy, you raise the vibration of the people around you, and then that's how you change the whole C4.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But getting back to the issue of grief, and let me give you one of the concepts that was given to me by Spirit. When we love somebody, we are all energetically connected down to the cellular level. Every cell in your body is connected to every cell of the person that you love. When their body dies, that energetic that energetic connection goes away because their body shuts down. The animation of their body no longer is there. So grief is a physical pain. It's an overwhelming physical pain of literally a loss. And people tend to look at it as being about the story of who the person was to you and what the emotions are. And I think it's much, much more than that. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit more about a situation in which the communication was able to help somebody who was grieving.
Well, there's so many,
Oh, I'm sure.
There's so many. Let me just start with soulmates. A lot of people think that soulmates have to be a husband or wife, and that's not the case. A soulmate can be a best friend. A soulmate can be a brother. A soulmate can be a coworker. And when we lose a coworker, or we lose a sibling, or we lose a neighbor, and we are grieving, some people say, oh, it's just a neighbor, or it's just a coworker. Mm-hmm. But sometimes people, when they are in that grief mode, and that is a soulmate connection, that's devastating. That's devastating. And so when I do work with clients, and they come in, and that person comes in from spirit, and they wrap the arms around, I actually literally see that person's spirit wrapping the arms around my client, right sometimes before I let my client know they're about ready to wrap the arms around and give a hug. Many times the clients say, oh my gosh, I just got goosebumps. And then I say, well, they're wrapping the arms around you right now. They feel it sometimes before I express it. But, one story that stands out of my mind here, I had a client going back about 15 years ago, and she came in, and she was probably in her late 60s, and she was there to, connect with her father who passed over. Well, her father came right on in. He was a professional baseball player back in, I believe, in the 1940s. Came right on in, came in very strong, and he said, I'm so glad you're here. Please give love to, my other daughter and my son. So I told this to my client. I said, he wants to give this attention, this love to your sister and to your brother. And she goes, I don't have a sister. I just have a brother. And I said to her, I said, no, your father's saying give this attention to your sister as well as your brother. Well, she got very upset with me because she thought I was poking at her. And she actually finished the sitting, and she left. I can tell that she left the office very disgruntled. She called the office about maybe two and a half weeks later, crying frantically on the phone. She says, I called my brother up in New York, and I was telling him the crap that you told me, and about how Dad said, give this attention to this sister. And she was telling her brother, what a bunch of crap. And he says, well, I think it's about time that we tell you. And she says, tell me what? Well, Dad had an affair back in 1947, and we have a half sister, but he told me never to tell you because he didn't want to hurt you, but he also felt that you weren't old enough to get this information. She went into the sitting dealing with the healing there with her father who passed over. But she didn't know what she was getting herself into. And then she found out about this half-sister. I saw her a few years back. She actually connected with that half-sister, and she now has a relationship with this half-sister, and it's just totally changed her life. So there's so many different stories that come through that, a person can receive healing, can receive that closure with a valid medium. And when I say with a valid medium, meaning when it's professionally trained. Whenever you go to a medium, you never let the medium know who you're trying to connect with. If they ask you, you hang up the phone, or you basically walk out of the office and say thank you very much. The less the medium knows, the better. Because when you go to a medium, it's about getting as much information from spirit. Sometimes I have a client, out of just sheer nervousness, David, they'll come into the office and they'll say, oh my gosh, I sure hope my mother's here. She just died 3 months ago, and it was breast cancer. Do you see her? And I just dropped my mouth, and I said, well, you already given me this information. Now I have to really pull out a lot more information. I wish you would not have said that. And sure, we're able to get the information to come through, but the less the medium knows, the better. Then you're knowing that you're getting a valid, ethical, honest sitting. I tell my clients what Spirit tells me. I never tell them what they want to hear. And the reason why, quite frankly, it's not worth karmically. I don't want to pass over in Spirit telling me, oh, back in 2015 you lied to that person, and back in 2012 you lied to this person, and I'm not going to play that game. It's not worth it.
Right.
It's not worth it.
Right. And since there is no time anyway, there is nothing that goes away.
True. But as you read in the book, the opening chapter, there's is the 9/11, and that was one of my first sittings, going back to early 2000s, and that was just a very, very powerful sitting, and I put that in the opening chapter of the plane hitting the World Trade Center with that person still in the plane. And I wanted to put that as the first chapter of the book, just to really wake up the client and wake up the reader, rather, and say, hey, listen, this is life and death. We are dealing with spirit here. We're dealing with a person who has passed over very tragically, and they're coming through and they're showing their pure form. They're showing how they looked before the plane accident, how their personality was shining through. And many times that's what the person at Spirit Side wants to leave with that sitter, is remember me for what I looked like before, right, not what happened at the end.
Right. All of the messages that I've ever heard, basically, where everything is okay. I love you.
Yeah. It's all about love, And whether a client comes in that doesn't speak English, well, if they don't speak English, they just need to have a translator. But it's so much about that love, because it's kind of like the old-fashioned back in the 1970s. Remember when we used to make phone calls overseas? It was crazy. It was like $9 a minute or something like that. It was something crazy. Yep. And back at that expensive phone call, you're not going to say, "What did you have for lunch today?" You're going to say, "Oh, I miss you. I love you. I hope you're well." That's what you used to say back in the 70s when we used to make those international phone calls. And I tell my clients now, when we do work like this, it's the same thing. It's like they're taking this opportunity with a valid medium who's going to get this across to their loved ones and say, "Gosh, I miss you. Gosh, I love you. Great, your hair looks great short. It used to be long," or whatever it may be. In order to get that connection across, they're not going to say, "What did you have for lunch yesterday?" or what are you doing now for a living, or things like that. That's just trivial stuff. They don't care about that. They want to get that attention of love across, and that's the most important thing, David, and you're absolutely correct on that earlier.
Or they say, or the other thing I've heard is, "See you soon."
Yes, right. Well, in my sittings, people sometimes will say to me, I've been seeing my late husband coming through in dreams, and I think it's my time to come through. And I said, well, let's find out about this. And I'm looking at the husband, I said, are you here to collect her? He shakes his head no, and he goes, absolutely not. I'm just here to give her a kiss goodnight every night. And so here this client, this is even a few weeks ago, thought that she was about ready to pass over. And I'm like, nope, he's just giving you a kiss goodnight every night when you go to sleep. So that changed her prerogative and her perspective on life and death, but it also changed her perspective on life, that she now knows that she's going to be living a lot longer to enjoy those grandchildren that she has.
Right. It's just it's wonderful work. I have so many questions, and we're coming towards the end of the show. What's the message you want to leave with people?
Love one another. Love your neighbor as yourself. It's like we're living in a society now where especially here in the States, we're a melting pot of different cultures and different religions, and even different personalities. And if you can look at each person that comes into your life and say, whether it's a color of their skin or their religion or their personality or their ethics, it's about, this person's a teacher for me. What am I supposed to learn? Am I supposed to learn patience? Am I supposed to learn tolerance? Am I supposed to learn forgiveness? What am I supposed to learn? And if you can look at each person that comes in your life and saying, you're my teacher, what am I supposed to learn? And listen, sometimes we don't want to really learn that day. I was born I was the youngest of 6 kids. I am the youngest of 6 kids in a very, very traditional Catholic family. And I believe that we reincarnate in soul groups, that we pick our brothers and sisters. Right. We pick our mothers and fathers. I'm telling you, I've picked a couple siblings that I have to keep on saying, okay, these are my teachers. and they're in my own family, but I have to say that again and again. What am I supposed to learn? Is it forgiveness? Is it open-mindedness? Is it patience? And that's one thing that I would like to leave with your audience. There is, look at each person that comes to your life as a teacher and saying, what am I supposed to learn? What is this person trying to teach me? And really open your mind to ask yourself and really be open. What am I supposed to learn with this? If we're all one, and these are just shells that we're wearing, and when we pass over, we're all the same, what is it we're supposed to be learning? And that is about loving one another. And that's the most important thing.
Right. And the big challenge in being in a physical body.
And one last thing, I know we're running out of time here, but you can appreciate this with, being in Haiti, but, being in India, going over there, there's such a spiritual wealth, spiritual wealth, but they are basically materially bankrupt. I came back here to the States, and my mouth just dropped. I mean, here in the States, we're so spiritually bankrupt, but, materially wealthy. Both ways are wrong, so it's about staying in balance. Raising the vibration with your spirituality. That's the most important thing.
One of the lessons for me in Haiti was here were these people that had less than what we would consider nothing, and they were the most generous people I had ever met.
Exactly.
They were extraordinary, and not just emotionally. They would give you whatever you needed, whenever you needed it, just because you were a friend.
Absolutely. Right. And here in this country, we've gotten so busy, and that's where I feel that in a few years that this country is going to have a pretty big shift. It's going to be pretty drastic, where a lot of people are going to start having to wake up to, okay, what's really important here? What's the most important thing? And that's just really loving one another and loving ourselves. We got to start loving ourselves first before we can love one another, and that's where a lot of people have issues too. They can't love themselves.
Right.
But if you can start loving yourself first, then you're going to be able to love one another.
Well, Tim, as always happens when we have fascinating guests, we're out of time.
Well, just have to have me back then. Maybe by popular demand. If you get a lot of calls or a lot of emails and you want me back, I'll come back.
I'd love to. We often have people come back, and I'd love to. And stay on the line after the show, and we'll chat for a little bit.
That sounds great.
My guest tonight is Tim Braun. Please give us your web address again.
TimBraun.net. TimBraun.net.
And your new book is?
Life and Death. It's on Amazon right now. You can order it, and it'll be out in about 2.5 weeks.
Fantastic. I so appreciate you taking the time to be on the show.
And thank you, David, for what you do. You're lifting the vibration, and you're lifting the consciousness of the world as well. So, my hat off to you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting work and not quite as straightforward as mediumship. But yes, thank you very much for the acknowledgement.
Well, you're humble. See, that's good. You're in the right space.
As the old saying goes, one tries.
Right. Well, you're doing it. And again, our hats off to you for lifting the vibration up. And I'm sure your listening audience agrees with me.
Well, thank you, Tim. Again, my guest has been Tim Braun, spiritual medium. And thank you so much for being on the show, Tim.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, David.
And if you are at all curious, who is this guy, David, and what does he do? You can go to househealing.com, and cleverly hiding in plain view on the contact tab is every way I could figure out for you to get in touch with me, including a scheduling calendar. I do a 20-minute free phone assessment of whatever's going on with a person, place, situation, and you can schedule right on the website. If you want more about the show, that's also cleverly hiding at thefarkasfiles.com. We've been doing this for 4.5 years. We've got hundreds and hundreds of recorded interviews with people. fascinating people, many of whom come back more than once. And we're also on almost all of the streaming media outlets, iTunes podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Empower Radio has an app so that you can listen. And there's going to be a new app which is about to be released any second. I'll tell you about it as soon as it comes out. I was just told it's out. So you can go to empowerradio.com and check out the new app. The Empower Radio has wonderful programming 24/7. The Farkas Files is on at 9 p.m. every night with our live recording on Thursdays, but you can listen to us anytime. So I hope you'll take advantage of that. There are wonderful people on Empower Radio, and I encourage you to sample all the other incredible folks and the other shows on the platform. So, again, this is David Franklin Farkas for the Farkas Files. The truth is in here somewhere on Empower Radio. Have a fantastic week.